In this lesson, we're going to break down Jerry's solo on Brown-Eyed Women from Hartford, Connecticut, 1977. You'll see the masterful way he weaves between targeting chord tones, pentatonic patterns, and soulful bends. I'll show you how to play the entire solo note for note, but first, here it is a bit slowed down so you can really see what's going on. Welcome to the lesson. Chris here. Jerry's really playing around the chord changes a lot. I'm going to talk through not only what's happening, but what chord is happening behind the solo. So he's playing to the changes, and then a lot of it is really kind of E major pentatonic based, or C sharp minor pentatonic based might be even a better way to kind of frame it. I've got this one broken down into 6 different sections. They're typically going to be through an entire round of like the verse progression, and let's get right into it. To kick it off, I'm going to just play through the first section nice and slow, and then give you some tips and tricks and kind of break down what's going on after that. This note right here will be the first note of the second section. So the first little pickup line, it resolves to the note C sharp, which is actually also the chord being played at that time. This really cool, like it's not even really quite a quarter bend, but it's up here on 11 of high E with a little pull off. If you can hear that just slight bend, it gives it this beautiful emotion between the 9th of a C sharp minor and the minor 3rd. So moving on from there, we're going to go 12th fret with a pull off. Then I like to move up to 14 for this next part of the B string. And then this little kind of trilly move, 11 to 13. That measure right there was happening against an E chord, and now that I just played that E chord, listen especially from the 14th fret. You can tell he's really accenting the major 3rd, which is G sharp. Moving on from there, we're going to move to 11th fret of G. I like to do it with the ring finger. That was against a B chord. So try to keep the sound of that chord in your mind's ear, so to speak. And basically he's staying to like that C sharp minor pentatonic, but what's cool is that he highlights the 10th fret, which is the note A, and if we're playing a B, and if you were to put an A into that, it would turn it into more of a B7, like a dominant chord. And so by adding that one note into our minor pentatonic, it brings out that quality in the chord being played. Now the rest of the band goes to an A for the next part, and what Jerry's going to play is 9th fret of D, and like I said, that A that I just hit is going to be the next section. But, you know, against the A, this part is kind of interesting because he's playing off of this G natural. He I think he's hammering on. And then goes to 9, slides down. And, you know, if we're going to keep it in this sort of C sharp minor pentatonic thought, that's like doing the C sharp minor blues scale, just adding the blue note, which is this 10th fret. So it just gives it a little attitude that it wouldn't have without that one note in there. So again. That gets us into the second section. So why don't I play through this next part and give you a rundown on what's happening. To start this part out, we're going to be back to a C sharp minor chord. And then we'll end up hitting 14 of the B string, that's a C sharp, and the chord will be a C sharp minor chord. So speaking of C sharp minor, that was the first chord that was being played against this new section. So let me talk you through it. So starting on the 7th fret, that's where we kind of left off from the end of the first section. Remember, we did this hammer-on pull-off move. Now this is interesting. He hits an A, and we're playing it against a C sharp minor, and it gives it this kind of really serious tone. He doesn't hang on it long, just a really quick move, and then he slides up to a C sharp from the 9th fret to the 11th fret. Now this is really cool and unusual. So we just heard this A natural. Now he's going to play an A sharp on the 11th fret, and it's really quick. He just slides up to 14 again to a C sharp and then to a D. So why don't I play that part again? It's just so interesting and so unique. So that was all against a C sharp minor chord. Now there's going to be an E major chord with the rest of the band, and he's going to go like this. Now that one measure right there, you can tell a lot of times when the rest of the band is playing an E chord, Jerry's really leaning into that major third. In this case, a G sharp. So now I love this next move. He goes up to 14 to B, and he ends up kind of walking up to D sharp, which is the major 7th of an E, to the 9th to the 3rd. And so what that ends up doing is it kind of gives the vibe of a major 7th chord, kind of like Eyes of the World. You know, you've got that E major 7. Even though the rest of the band, I think, is just playing a regular E, he kind of peppers in that tone. It's really quick, but it just gives it a little vibe that wasn't there before. Next, the rest of the band is going to hit an A chord, and then he's going to go like this: 14 of high E, that was all against an A. And the cool thing here is he is, you know, using the same kind of zone that we were in against the E chord, but now what happens is as we target that D sharp, it almost gives it like a Lydian sound. Lydian is just, it's just a major chord or scale that has a raised 4th. In this case, it's a D sharp, and that's what he ends up targeting there. So again, back up to this 14th fret. He hits the 3rd, 9th, then the major 7th of an A major. So if you were to play it as a chord, it would sound like that. Really cool stuff. And then the rest of the band at that point is going to go back to an E as he hits an E on the 9th fret. So that whole run I just did was against an E major chord. And a lot of it is E major bass. I mean, we start with the note E, we slide up to the major 3rd, 5th, 3rd, 5th. This is cool. He's going to hit root, major 7, back to root, 9, root 9, 3rd, 9, 3rd, and then the 4th as we walk back down. you know, all of that, you know, I don't want to get lost in the intervals, but what it comes down to is tension and release. There's like a tension and release to this part, tension and release here, tension and release here, tension with that one note, and it needs to kind of resolve, and it goes back down to E, and then we're going to hit the 14th fret, which is the root of the next chord in the third section, which I'm going to play next. And we're going to be playing that against the C sharp minor chord. So here it is. I'll play it nice and slow, and then just like the other parts, I'll give you some tips along the way. This last little piece I just hit is going to be the next section, but so much cool stuff going on there. So this part has a kind of a minor bluesy sound to it, and we're going to start on a C sharp here with a bend there on 14 to high E. Now we are going to pre-bend and come down like that, kind of just working in reverse, and then this really awesome slide from 14 to 16. That was with the B string, by the way. And that is happening against the E chord. So remember how last time we kind of accented that major 7th note that gave it like that, like I was saying, like a major 7th chord feel. This is a way you can kind of trick the listeners into getting that vibe, even if the rest of the band isn't necessarily playing that kind of chord. So here it is again. Then he's just going major 3rd, 9, root. Now this is awesome. A big bend on 14. Now that's all against a B major chord. So we're bending up to the major 3rd of a B. Imagine a bar chord up here. So we're basically bending up to the major 3rd of that, not basically, literally, and then hitting the 5th of the chord, just like if we were picking up there, like that. And then he pre-bends again down, a little less of a bend, maybe a half bend there, with a pull off to 12, 12 again, 14, pull off. Okay, now this next lick is so cool. What will really help with this is try to envision like a D shape way up here. This is going to be an A major chord. You could think of it as like the upper structure of a C, which is how I usually prefer to think of that, but it's nice and easy to see that shape or kind of imagine it. So he's going to go like this. And then we end up in this next part. But the main point here I wanted to draw your attention to is, even though I said he's playing off of this shape, you know, if you connect it to the larger form, like a C shape or whatever you want to call it, see how we can go up to this is the root of an A, the 3rd, major 3rd I should say, the 5th. He's just connecting the major 3rd chromatically up to the 5th, which is a really Jerry kind of thing to do. And then he goes back to the 3rd, root, 5th. What a cool lick there. Picking up where we left off, we'll be on 11, sliding up to 13 to G. That leads us into the next section, and you know, as usual, there's some really cool stuff going on. This time around, the cool thing is a lot of the stuff that works really beautifully over an E major chord works equally well against the C sharp minor because they're relative major and minor from each other. So you know how we've been accenting that G sharp against the E chord, which is the major 3rd of that one? Well, now it's the same stuff we were doing before against that E chord, but it sounds a little different because now it's against a C sharp minor. Now against the E chord that everybody else is playing, he's going to do sort of a classic major pentatonic kind of bend from the major 3rd. And then he just does a pull off from 11 to 9 to D. This is really cool. Again, that kind of major blues sound. although that has a flat 7 in it, and while Jerry's playing that, the rest of the band's on an A. And one of the takeaways with that is that if you're playing over the 4 chord of your jam or your chord progression, if the vibe is right on the A chord, or sorry, the 4 chord, it won't always be an A chord. Sometimes throwing a Mixolydian kind of sound or a dominant chord sound can be cool. Notice that throughout the other parts on E, or around the E or the A, he had been accenting instead of a D natural, he was hitting a D sharp. It was up here when we did it before. It has more of a bluesy kind of attitude kind of sound to it when he goes. That's just kind of more rock and roll sound. Next up, he's going to do a similar thing, sliding from 10 to 11 of A, and then back to the 11th fret, which is the major third. So we're just basically outlining chord tones in that, and it kind of sounds like The Entertainer. Now, after that, he does another kind of minor third thing here, a little kind of bluesy thing. Why don't I play that whole run so far? So from 10 to 11. Now a major pentatonic kind of thing. We're going to shift to 7 of E. So the stuff that was right here, that's against an E chord, and he's just doing a lot of almost like Jimi Hendrix kind of stuff when you hear Jimmy doing stuff like that. Jerry's doing some similar kind of stuff here. And then back to 11. Now this run is really cool. Major pentatonic. Until here, he hits the major 7 of an E, and then major 7 to root. That last little run again. Now we're back to the C sharp minor chord, and Jerry's up here on the 14th fret, coming in on the and of 1. So 1 E and a. So much awesome stuff going on. So to begin with, it's kind of that bluesy, bendy stuff we had going on earlier, but there's a little twist here. So in a second, he's going to do a crazy bend. Starting here on 14 high E, we just do a little pull off there, and then a big bend on 14. Now come on back down with a pull off, 14 to B. Now here's this really big bend. He's going to do a 1.5 bend, meaning 3 fret bend. So instead of bending a whole step like that, he's going to go like that. So basically, if you're not sure, the pitch to bend to, here's the 14th fret. Listen to the tone of, or the pitch of the 17th fret. So just go up 3 frets, and then when you bend, try to match those 2 tones the best that you can. So again here, back to 12. Okay, now a similar run to what we did a minute ago on this A, where we did from the 3rd to the 5th with a chromatic move. Let me talk you through that. So I would encourage you to kind of picture it the same way we did a minute ago with the A, when we did the... It's a lot like that, but now it's a B chord because we're a whole step higher than we were before. And Jerry's leading in, he's going 4 E and which means as the B chord hits, he's actually on the flat 5 of that chord, which is so cool, going up to the 5th of it. So that was all against a B chord. And by the way, the last chord was an E chord. I think I forgot to say that. But now after that run, let me do it one more time. against the B chord. Now we're going to an A, and it kind of just outlines a shape like this. If you can picture your bar chord, it's like I think of that as like an F shape. And then just kind of like a sus4 kind of vibe. Then it comes off of it. That's going to lead us to the sixth and last section we'll look at for this solo before he goes back to the verse. This is really cool. Here's the whole section. I'm going to play it and then we'll break it down. And that's where the whole thing ends, and we go back to the verse. So let's break down what's going on. It's this E major kind of shape. It's a first inversion of it that he's playing off of here. So 6 of the D string, I do it with the ring finger. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to pick that note, go over a string to the B string, hammer on 4 to 6, like that. It's a really cool line. Now, as the rest of the band goes to an E, we're going to go on the and of 1 again, from the 1st fret to the 4th fret. And right there, that's kind of like you've probably heard a lot of that kind of stuff in a lot of players. Like it's a classic, kind of turnaround thing, but he's just doing a little bit of it. And then an A major again. He ends up on the 9th fret of B, then a pull off from 10 to 11, a bend on 12, and then this last little kind of push here, we're going to go pre-bend down from 12. Which is kind of bringing everything full circle. It sounds a lot like the way we started the whole thing. Let's go back to that pre-bend on the 12th fret of B. Then we go whole step bend on 11 of G. Then this quick move, 9 of E to 12 of B. And then another quick little move, 9 of B to 11 of G. And then another kind of pre-bend move. Which leads us back to the verse with C sharp minor. That last measure. It's all just kind of C sharp minor pentatonic kind of stuff. And then a little chromatic walk up to C sharp. There's so many little hidden gems in there. Just as like a little recap of some of the concepts we can work with there, a lot of it is targeting, the 3rd of a chord or the 5th and playing around with really familiar, simple shapes. Like as a recap of some of the shapes, we had like what I would think of as like the F shape or like the C shape or like the D, which is the upper structure of the C shape. But he would like couple those with chromaticism and then back to like the chord shape. And then sometimes he would do just straight up pentatonic, which is a beautiful blend, and it's all really simple stuff that you definitely can take advantage of. So a cool approach, as always, is to take some of the stuff that really inspires you, learn it inside out, and then see if you can improvise with it and kind of switch things around and take it apart, put it back together in your own way. So I hope you enjoyed that. Leave any suggestions for solos or songs or riffs that you want to see lessons on, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.